Okay, Jelly Skeleton coming at you with a tutorial for Movecraft. So, just to preface this all, I have only been doing this for a few days and I do not know everything yet, but I do know enough about animation to, give you guys some tips. And I have figured out a few systems. So, first let's get the boring stuff out of the way. The numbers, there's a ton of them. Look at them all. There's so many. Oh my god, but not all of them really are all that relevant to what you're going to be trying to do. And let's first look at the most important number. And I'm going to share this number first because most of these animations you're going to be seeing, when I go frame by frame, you're going to want to ignore the fact that they are not synced up. Because the same amount of frames does not exist for the attacker and the defender. And that is because some frames I have playing for longer than others. And the reason for that is you want to accentuate or de-accentuate certain frames in order to make a smooth and crisp looking animation with that has punch and flair. So firstly, you're going to notice with the torso spin here, him spinning his torso is pretty smooth, right? That's a pretty smooth torso spin. And the reason being is because you see I've only got two, whatever the unit of time this is, I don't know what it is, but two in the frames, right? So each of these frames is very short, and I used every single different angle of the chest to create a smooth animation. However, you will see when he finally finishes with the uppercut, that's 22. That's 10 times longer than all these other ones. And that's because I wanted to hold on the uppercut and accentuate that uppercut in the animation, and the result is a quick animation and a stylish finish. Okay, so that's important. So when we're going through all that, that's what you want to keep in mind. If you're having problems getting this to sync up with this, you're going to probably face those problems with the techniques I'm going to be sharing with you. You're going to want to keep in mind this. And all you have to do is figure out what frame you need to correct the time on. It's really that simple. And as long as it plays out in the preview correctly, then you're going to get, that's what it's going to look like in-game. So next, I'm going to give you a couple of tips on some things that I figured out that I could not find online information or very little information. So the first one is blood, right? So you might want to make yourself bleed for some reason. It's possible in the game. It is 100% doable. You have to use a grapple. It has to be interacting with the opponent. It can't be like a strike, and it can't be a taunt. It has to be a grapple because you have to be having something in this animation right here. Because the way to make yourself bleed is you set up the damage like normal, and you set the bleeding like normal, and you actually put the damaged flag in the opponent's sprite. So that way he'll be inflicting damage to you, which will then cause the bleeding. And that's how I did the blood magic. That's, as far as I know, the only way to inflict bleeding to yourself that exists within the game. Another thing you're going to want to notice with numbers, coming back to the numbers, is over here there's a lot of numbers. Really, all these numbers here just reflect what position the various parts are in. And the part order reflects what parts layer on top of each other, but that's not all that there is to the layering. These letters here, the A, B, C, D, each one is closer to the screen. So A is the closest to the screen, and each one gets farther and farther away from the screen. They'll still appear the same distance, but as far as whether the game renders them, if I don't want say he's got an arm here, and I don't want it showing, then you have it behind the torso. So you want to make sure that, that is a factor. Over here, this is the same thing, your sprite priority. This is the entire sprite, right? So it represents this. And these two do interact, so, keep that in mind. And you're going to want, let me also tell you, I came across one other problem you all might face piecing together these animations, and that's with the Ultimate Muscle Buster here. And you'll see with the Ultimate Muscle Buster, oh, I'm sorry, not the Ultimate Muscle Buster. It is not, in fact, the Ultimate Muscle Buster. It is actually the Wizard's Manhattan Drop. Right, so the Wizard's Manhattan Drop here. If you have this S, for some reason, ticked in your opponent's settings, it can cause issues to where it will still render that sprite above this one, despite the fact that this is on B and this is on A. I don't know why that is, but his legs were rendering in front of him, and it should have rendered this leg back here behind him, as you see in the animation. And in the animation, the preview, it did. But when I went to test it in game, it did not, and it turned out that was the problem. So keep that in mind, because again, these are all pieced together from multiple different taunts and moves, right? Almost none of these animations I've created from scratch. I've taken just piecing them together, right? So a good example of me piecing together is... Actually, this move is made of a lot of parts. This is a really great example. First, we start off in the grapple. You want to make sure you start off in the grapple with grapple moves. Otherwise, your character is just basically going to teleport into the start of the move, and that's going to look bad. And you can steal these frames from mostly standing front grapple strikes. So there's all these different positions the strikes will set up. In this case, I actually do use the strike itself to set him up at the distance that I want, because I don't want him right next to him for the sake of the animation. And keep in mind, this is not synced up with this in this frame by frame thing, but when you hit play, it is, and that is again because of these numbers here being different. So just bear that in mind. So again, I had him do the punch, right? And then I found a taunt. There's lots of taunts that allow you to get movements. And again, I just simply modified the positions of his hand a bit, and when, at what time, again, using the amount of frames, he plays the animation, right? And then I took a running knee strike, so that that's what these two frames are from. And I modified this frame heavily to bring this foot out. But basically, these two frames link this frame to this frame, which is from the Manhattan drop itself, which again I just modified a little bit to make more or less jumping, because when you're linking these frames together, you're probably going to have to do an in-between frame or two, because otherwise the animation's just going to jump and it's not going to look that smooth. But it's simple enough and it's easy enough to do without having to create your own frames from scratch, because screw that. So you're basically, that's what this to that, right? That's simple, but that's actually 3 moves going one into the other that I've stitched together various animations from. And you just want to make sure that you keep in mind you want to modify a couple in between frames to make sure the animation looks smooth, right? And you're going to want to, again, accentuate how much time. I wanted his leg to be more accentuated here, so I gave it a time of 15 as opposed to a time of 5. So next, I'm going to go into basically my line of thought when I'm creating a move, and I'm going to use the butt munch. And yes, I realize that I am a juvenile. I do not care. I think it's hilarious, and but it's a very easy to understand move in what I was trying to accomplish. So a lot of your time is going to be spent searching the preset data, right? Okay, so I knew that because he's approaching him from behind, that I'm going to probably want to do down and near legs, right? So I want him to get him in a bent over position. So I'm just searching, I'm searching. Where's that bent over position? Where is it? It's coming up. There it is. Okay, and it's very brief. You'll see that frame is in there though, right? So that frame to go from this to that, okay? But of course, he's just not magically going to do that. There has to be a reason for it. So I'm like, okay, well, what if he gives him a little kick? And again, I went in here and I searched in the low attacks mostly until I found a low kick. And I simply animated the low kick. Bam. Again, this is not an accurate frame-by-frame representation because of these numbers. But when it plays out, that guy getting his booty ate like groceries. Okay, so now I'm gonna tell you, basically I took those frames, and those are 2 moves already that I've used to create this move. The third move I used to create this move is the diving headbutt to groin, because it just basically falls flat on your face. Is a good way to get him into that rotated position without having to rotate a ton of sprites, because screw that. There's gonna be frames in a move somewhere in this game. You will be able to find a similar position that you may or may not have to modify, but if you do have to modify it, it'll be way less work than making one from scratch. You do not need to be making most of your animations from scratch. You can just modify them. So these frames, purely the exact frames that are in that diving headbutt. This frame, again, modified to where instead of him coming in a more flat position, I have him more angled. That way he lines up with that scrumptious booty, right? So basically that's what that comes down to. Then finally, the last move, I can't remember what move I used, but I believe actually it was the crouching low like punch to gut, which is a very useful move just because of the few frames that it has in this crouching position. So that way he can transition back up to a standing position without, you know, just seemingly teleporting back to the standing position, and you're going to want to keep that in mind as well. So really what it comes down to is in this game, you can make them do anything. You can make them do literally anything. It just comes down to what you have in mind creatively. And so I'll give you an idea of how my brain typically works when I'm doing something like that. Take my most popular move, the fourth wall breaker. How can you not love the fourth wall breaker? Oh, so my EFED that I'm planning on going for is supposed to be very cartoony and over the top. Think of like a kind of like a Mortal Kombat mixed with the Attitude Era type thing, right? So I want to make all the moves ridiculous and kind of fighting game-esque. So I thought to myself, well, that spinning tombstone's already kind of like that. If I add some more height to it and make it a sit-out version, then it'll look cooler. And indeed, it does look cooler. But here's where your mind has to get creative, right? I thought to myself, well, what if, since it's a cartoon, and the character I'm making it for is kind of like The Rock, and if The Rock was in a cartoon, I feel like he would break the fourth wall all the time. So I thought, well, what if Wile E. Coyote style, before falling to the ground, he looks at the camera, looks down, whoa, uh-oh, and again, all these various head positions for a smooth transition from the head, right? And then finally gives a little cowabunga, and then finally crashes down. And now this frame is important too. I took this frame. Most of these frames up until this point came from the spinning pile driver. This frame came from the sit-out pile driver. But I modified it. I want to make it more cartoony and more impactful looking. So instead of his legs being flat looking, I put them up in the air as if he was flying down with so much force that it flings his limbs upward. And the way you position their limbs can make a move look more impactful. So when he comes down, his legs straighten out, he bounces back up, and then finally lands. And that makes the move look extremely impactful. Another way you can make moves look impactful is this Q here, which adds shake. So the higher the number, the more shake. And you will see I have a shake for his jumping, and I have a shake for when he lands. The bigger shake when he lands. That because I don't want to accentuate the first shake. I just want it to be there to convey the sense that he is jumping with a decent amount of force. Another trick, a good sound for whooshing. The whoosh sound, really not that effective. Fast move, good whooshing sound. Keep that in mind. You want to whoosh, use fast move, baby. And so, essentially, you just have to think, your brain has to see what is going to be the next step I'm going to do. And if it's something ridiculous or if it's something simple, to add that extra sense of impact. If it's just making their legs point up a little more, if it's taunting midair, it doesn't matter. You can apply this to any type of move, not just cartoony ones. That said, because of the art style I'm going for, I am going for cartoony moves. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about a projectile I made. Yes, you can make a projectile. And simply, I just took the chop and added a fork. And during the animation of the chop, I have the fork moving a little more and a little more. And then I have the hitbox set up to be long. And mind you, it is a little bit janky because it will hit immediately regardless of where the fork is. However, the fork moves fast enough that it creates the illusion that they're getting hit by the projectile, which is good enough. And, so if you ever want to do anything wacky and crazy like projectiles, it is definitely doable. Now let me talk about... I already spoke about the blood magic, I believe, right? Make yourself bleed with your opponent. To make yourself bleed, in case I didn't, I've recorded this multiple times because my thing kept effing up. Can't remember if I did. You're going to put the damage flag on the opponent's sprite, and that will actually inflict the bleeding to you. So if I repeated myself on that one, sorry, but it is what it is. Hypnotize. Here's another little trick I learned. If you want to stun the opponent, like say make a move that leaves them standing but stunned, you're going to want to use this. Dizzy standing. And you'll see it plays out like this. Now in-game, at that final frame, he will actually enter a stun state. So, you know, in order to make the movement animation, again, I took a taunt, which is the airplane spin, where he's walking around with his arms out, and I simply lowered the arms to make him spin around. Because for some reason, when the game put him in the stun state, it flipped his sprite. But then that's what made me realize, again, this comes to your creativity and seeing things. Well, what if instead I just have him turn around and be stunned, and that sets up a back grapple, right? And you just have to keep things like that in mind. You know, you want to try and be creative and think of unique ways that you can make these moves interact, right? So it really just comes down to that. It comes down to the in-between frames, the time, creativity, and being willing to search through these presets for the positions you need. That's really what it comes down to. Because on none of these moves have I animated a single frame from scratch. Every single one is modified from pre-existing animations. It's just a matter of linking them together in a way that looks like it flows naturally, right? So the ultimate muscle buster, uppercut, boom. I took again. You're going to be using the low body punch for a lot of things, just for that ducking animation. For in this one, there was no uppercut in the game. That's a grappling uppercut. So I just simply extended his arm for a couple more frames. These are the custom frames, right? Custom frames. Then I have him fly up, and his shadow, mind you, he was here, right? Their shadows are not aligned. So I actually have him moving. This is how you position your characters. Left, right, up, down. And this does up and down, right? But also, if you tick this, and this is something that they don't share in the frickin' instructions, which are very basic and stupid, it will change it to where you can actually move him left and right away from their shadow as well. Because sometimes when you flip animations, because you will have to be flipping some animations to make them work, because the taunts will be facing the wrong way. You simply, that's up and down flip, that's left and right flip. And you'll see when I flip him, his shadow does not flip with him. So you're going to want to correct the shadows, and then you may need to drag the frames around to position them correctly. So, there's another move. The torso spin. Let's go back to the torso spin for foot positioning, okay? You're going to want to make sure if their leading foot, or in this case his back foot, is the foot that's staying planted, that each frame, this foot does not move. It stays right where it is. You see that? And that creates that smooth animation. So you're going to want to make sure to keep that in mind. Where their feet are placed is going to make a noticeable difference on how smooth your animation is going to look. And when they're walking forward around, for example, Hypnotize is a good example with the animation here. And you'll see in the taunt itself, it is like this. And it's a good example, this taunt, of what I'm talking about with the foot position. You'll see his foot starts out here, right? But then, or rather, it starts here. And then you'll see the toe. Just pay attention to this toe. You'll see that toe still in the same spot. Oh, now the other toe, same spot. Similar spot, hard to tell because it's being hidden. But the point being is, again, same spot. That makes the animation completely smooth. So you just want to, you know, try and keep all these things in mind. And if y'all have any more questions or comments or any additional stuff you want me to go into, just let me know. This has been That Weirdo, Jelly Skeleton. Got more content coming y'all's way. Stay tuned in the next couple months for the most craziest cartoony E-Fed you've ever seen in your life, with all kinds of wild and crazy commentary. Peace out.